The sky was dark, heavy with rolling clouds, the kind that warned of danger. The wind carried the smell of rain, sharp and cold. The human traveler walked along the edge of the river, his boots sinking into the wet ground. He had come to this alien land for trade, but the storm came without warning. Far away on the other side of the river, a small alien girl was running. Her feet splashed in shallow water as she tried to escape the rising flood. She looked fragile, her body thin, her clothes already torn from her journey. She stumbled, fell to her knees, but stood again, fighting against the storm. The rain began to fall harder, each drop like a stone against skin. The human lifted his head, blinking against the water. He saw her across the river, a tiny figure in the storm. For a moment he thought she was only a shadow, but then she raised her arms as if begging the sky to stop. The river swelled, waves smashing against the banks, trees bent under the force of the wind, their branches snapping and flying like spears. The human shouted, his voice lost in the roar of the storm. He tried to wave to her, but she was already slipping closer to the edge. Then the ground gave way. Mud slid under his feet. On the other side, the girl screamed as the river pulled her in. Without thinking, the human leapt forward, but the river was faster. The current grabbed him too, dragging him into the wild water. The world became chaos. Water filled his ears, his eyes. He fought to breathe, his arms thrashing against the current. The girl was there, struggling beside him, her small hands clawing at nothing. They were both powerless, carried away by the raging flood. The river spun them, smashing them against rocks, tearing at their clothes. The human felt the sharp sting of stone on his arm. The girl's fragile body was tossed like a leaf, her cries lost to the storm. He reached for her again and again, until his fingers finally caught her wrist. Her skin was cold, trembling, but she clung to him. He pulled her close, holding her against his chest as the current dragged them. Together they rolled through the violent water. Their clothes were ripped away by the force of the flood, leaving them exposed but alive. At last the current threw them against a cluster of rocks. The human slammed into the hard stone, pain exploding in his side. He dragged the girl onto the rocks, coughing, his chest burning. She lay beside him, shivering, her arms wrapped around herself, trying to hide. The rain still poured, but weaker now. The storm began to pass, though. The river still roared with fury. The human looked at the girl, her wide eyes staring back at him. She was afraid, ashamed, her body bare under the torn remains of cloth. Slowly, he took off his jacket, soaked but still warm. He wrapped it around her shoulders. She gasped, staring at him as if she could not believe it. No one had ever done that for her. She whispered something in her own tongue, but he did not understand. He only nodded, keeping her close. They sat on the rocks, the storm fading around them. The alien girl leaned into him, weak and silent. The human stared out at the raging river, knowing they had survived. But the danger was not over. The land was wild, the hunters unknown, and the storm had only just begun. And so, in the heart of the flood, two strangers held on to each other, stripped bare not only of cloth but of walls between them. Their journey was no longer separate. The storm had forced them together, and neither of them knew how much it would change their lives. The night grew darker as the storm slowly drifted away. The rain weakened to a light drizzle, but the river still raged with power. The human and the alien girl lay on the rocks, both trembling from the cold. Their bodies were weak, their clothes torn and clinging to their skin, leaving little to cover them. The alien girl wrapped her thin arms around herself, her head bowed low. Her skin was pale, marked with scratches from rocks and branches. She tried to curl into a ball. As if she wanted to vanish, her small chest rose and fell in quick breaths, each one filled with fear. The human watched her, concern deep in his eyes. He knew she was afraid not only of the storm but also of him. To her, he was a stranger, a taller, stronger being, and now they were both exposed. He slowly moved closer, his steps careful, not wanting to scare her more. When he reached her, he slid his jacket from his shoulders and placed it around her trembling frame. The jacket was wet, but it gave her some cover, some safety. She flinched at first, clutching the cloth as if it were something precious. Her wide eyes lifted to meet his, filled with shock. For a moment, silence hung between them. The sound of the river roared in the distance, but around them there was stillness. The girl's lips moved, whispering soft words in her alien tongue. The human could not understand, but her tone was full of disbelief, almost like she was asking why. He did not answer with words. He only gave a small nod, his expression calm. He sat beside her, keeping a respectful distance, but his presence was strong. She looked at him again, her face showing a mix of fear and something else, something like hope. Her hands clutched the jacket tightly, as if afraid it would be taken away. She turned her face to the ground, hiding her eyes. Her thin shoulders shook as tears mixed with the rain still dripping from the sky. The human reached out slowly, placing his hand on the stone between them, showing he was not leaving. The girl lifted her head slightly. She studied him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Her species had eyes that shimmered like stars in the night. She seemed so small, so fragile, yet there was a quiet strength in her. She did not push the jacket away. She did not run. She stayed. The human began to speak. His words were slow, soft, meant to calm. He told her they would survive, that the storm was passing, that she was safe now. She could not understand the language, but the tone reached her heart. She blinked, staring at him with wonder. Slowly, she moved closer, not much, just enough that she sat near his side. The human felt the cold from her skin, like ice against the night air. He wanted to keep her warm, but he did not touch her. He only stayed, letting her feel his presence, letting her choose to trust. Minutes passed and the storm clouds broke. The first thin ray of moonlight touched the wet ground. Shining faintly on the rocks, the girl looked up at the sky, her lips parting as if she had not seen the moon in a long time. Her small fingers touched the edge of his jacket as if testing if it was real. The human leaned back, his eyes never leaving her. He wondered who she was, where she came from, and why she was alone in the storm. She was too young to be wandering alone, too fragile to fight the river. There had to be a reason, something darker hiding behind her silence. Then, a sound broke the quiet. A crack in the distance, like wood snapping. The girl's body stiffened instantly, her glowing eyes widened. She turned her head sharply, staring into the trees beyond. The human followed her gaze, his muscles tensing. She whispered something in a hurried tone, her voice trembling. The human could not understand, but he did not need to. Her fear told him enough. Someone, or something, was near. The girl clutched the jacket tighter, pressing closer to him. She had trusted him with her body's weakness, and now she leaned on him with her fear. The human placed one hand on the ground, ready to move. His eyes narrowed as the shadows shifted. The flood had brought them together, but now a new danger waited. The storm was over, but the true test of survival was only beginning. The night air grew colder as the river quieted. The storm was gone, but its scars remained on the land. Trees were broken, mud covered the ground, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. The human stood carefully, pulling the alien girl up. With him, her body was light, shaking under the weight of fear and exhaustion. She leaned on him as they stepped away from the rocks. The flood had carried them far from any road or path. Around them stretched a wild forest, thick with shadows and strange sounds. The alien girl glanced around nervously, her glowing eyes darting at every rustle in the dark. She whispered words in her tongue, short and quick, as if praying to something. Unseen, the human did not understand, but he could feel her fear. He tried to smile at her. Though his lips were pale from the cold, he pointed ahead, making a gesture with his hand, showing they needed to keep moving. She nodded slowly, gripping his jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her trust was still fragile, but she followed, step by step into the unknown. The forest floor was soft with wet leaves. Every step sank into mud. The human used a branch as a staff, steadying himself and guiding her. The alien girl's bare feet left small prints behind. He noticed the cuts on her legs from the rocks. The sight made his chest tighten. She had been through too much already. After some time, they found a small clearing where the trees bent away from the river. The moonlight shone through, silver and cold. The girl sat down on a fallen log, breathing heavily. The human looked at her, seeing how weak she was. He knelt and tore strips from his own shirt, gently wrapping them around her wounds. She flinched at first, but then she stared at him, eyes wide with surprise. Her people had never been treated with kindness, not like this. She murmured a soft sound, almost like a thank you, though her words were broken. The human only gave a small nod, his hands steady as he tied the cloth. When he finished, she stared at him with new eyes. For the first time, there was no fear in them. Instead, there was a spark of wonder, as if she was asking silently, why would a stranger care? Why would a human protect her? The night grew deeper and the cold began to bite harder. The girl shivered, pulling the jacket tighter. The human knew she could not survive the night like this. They needed warmth. They needed fire. He looked around the clearing, searching for anything dry enough to burn. At last he found branches under a fallen tree. He stacked them carefully. Using a small spark tool from his pocket, soon a weak fire began to glow. The warmth spread slowly, golden light fighting back the shadows. The alien girl moved closer, holding out her thin hands to the flames. Her face softened, her lips trembling not with fear, but with relief. For the first time, she sat beside him willingly. The firelight danced in her glowing eyes. She lifted her head and pointed to the stars above, speaking in her soft alien voice. Her words were strange, but her meaning was clear. She was telling him something about the stars, about where she came from, about how far she had fallen. The human listened, though he understood nothing. Yet in her voice he heard pain, loss, and loneliness. His heart grew heavy. He realized she was not just a runaway girl. She was someone, broken by a cruel world, someone searching for safety. Then the sound returned, the one they had heard before. Branches snapping, slow footsteps pressing on wet ground. The girl froze, her eyes wide. Her hands shook as she clutched the jacket. She whispered again, faster this time, her voice full of dread. The human turned, his body tense. He stood and gripped the branch he had used as a staff. His eyes scanned the dark, searching for movement. He knew they were not alone. The hunters she had feared were near. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows. The alien girl pressed closer to him, her small body trembling. She trusted him now, but she also knew what danger was coming. The human held his ground, his heart pounding. He was ready to face whatever stepped from the shadows. The forest was no longer silent. The wild had turned into a cage, and the hunters were circling. The fire cracked softly in the clearing, but its warmth could not ease the tension in the rain. The human stood still, gripping his branch like a weapon. His eyes searched the darkness, his ears straining for every sound. The alien girl clung to his jacket, her glowing eyes wide with fear. From the trees came whispers, low voices speaking in a language the human did not know. The girl's body trembled as she recognized the sounds. Her captors were near. The men, who had once treated her like property, had followed the flood, and now they were close. The human tightened his grip on the branch. He knew he was one man and they were many, but he could not step back. Behind him was the girl, fragile and helpless. She looked at him with silent pleading, as if she expected him to leave her, but he did not move. A shape stepped into the moonlight, tall, armored, with skin painted in strange marks. Behind him came more, shadows with weapons. Their eyes glowed faintly as they watched. The human counted at least 5, maybe more, hidden in the dark. The leader smirked, his sharp teeth shining. He said something in the alien tongue, pointing at the girl. She gasped, shrinking back. Her voice shook as she whispered to the human, her words broken, but he could understand enough. They wanted her back. They wanted their prize. The human's jaw tightened. He stepped forward, standing between the girl and the hunters. His body was wet, tired, wounded, but his spirit burned. Strong, he raised the branch, showing he would not let them take her. The hunters laughed, their voices harsh. They saw him as weak, only a human lost in the storm. One of them stepped closer, swinging a blade. The human braced himself, his heart pounding. The girl reached out, clutching his arm. Her voice cracked as she begged him to run, to leave her, to save himself. She believed no one would ever fight. For her, no one ever had. Her eyes filled with tears, glowing brighter than the fire. But the human shook his head. His voice was calm but firm. He would not leave her. He had already made his choice. She was not a burden, not a prize. She was someone worth protecting. The hunters moved closer, circling the fire. Their shadows stretched long across the ground. The girl pressed closer against his back, hiding behind him. The human stood tall, raising the branch higher. His muscles burned, but his spirit grew stronger with every step they took. The leader spoke again, his voice mocking. He pointed to the human and laughed. His warriors joined in, the sound echoing through the forest like a cruel song. But their laughter did not break him. It only made his stance firmer. The human swung first, his branch striking the nearest hunter across the chest. The alien staggered back. Surprised by the force, the others hissed, raising their weapons. The firelight flashed against their blades. The fight had begun. The human moved fast, striking left and right. His strength came not from anger, but from determination. Each swing was for the girl behind him. Each step was to keep her safe. The hunters pressed harder, but he did not give ground. The girl watched, her heart racing. She had never seen anyone fight for her, never seen anyone risk their life for her safety. Her lips moved in silent prayer, her eyes glowing like stars. She wanted to help, but fear chained her in place. The clash of wood against metal rang through the clearing. Sparks flew as blades struck stone. The human's arms grew heavy, but he refused to stop. One wrong move, and it would all end. Yet his spirit kept burning. The hunters snarled, circling him like wolves. They thought he would break soon. But as they closed in, the girl's voice rose above the chaos. She cried out in her alien tongue, a sound filled with desperation and hidden power. The hunters froze, for a moment their eyes narrowing. The human turned his head slightly, surprised. The girl's voice shook the air, trembling with something deep, something waiting to awaken. The hunter's arrival had brought fear, but it also brought something else. In that moment, the girl realized she was not as powerless as she believed, and the human realized he was not alone. The fight was not finished. The night was only beginning, and the true strength between them was about to be tested. The clearing burned with firelight as the hunters circled. The human stood firm, his branch raised like a sword. His body ached from the storm, but his eyes were sharp. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. He knew he was outnumbered, but he did not step back. The alien girl crouched behind him, her small hands gripping the torn edges of his jacket. She whispered words of fear, begging him again to run. Her voice cracked with desperation. She had seen men fall before these hunters many times. She could not imagine one human standing against them, but he only glanced back at her once. His expression was calm, firm. His lips pressed into a line that told her everything. He would not abandon her. He would fight until he could not stand anymore. The leader of the hunters sneered, his voice mocking as he barked commands. Two warriors lunged forward, blades flashing in the firelight. The human swung his branch hard. The wood cracked against metal, sparks flying into the night. One hunter staggered back with a growl. The other pressed in closer, slashing toward the human's chest. He twisted aside, the blade cutting through his sleeve but missing flesh. With a roar, he drove his branch forward, striking the warrior's shoulder. The alien fell back, hissing in pain. For a heartbeat, the circle wavered. The hunters had not expected such defiance. The human's heart thundered, his arms trembled, but his spirit grew stronger with each strike. He shouted, a raw cry that echoed in the clearing. It was not just anger. It was a vow, a promise to protect the one hiding behind him. The girl's eyes widened as she watched. She had never seen strength like this, not strength born of cruelty or power, but strength born of care. Each strike was for her. Each stand was to shield her. Her tears streamed down her cheeks. Glowing in the firelight, the hunters recovered quickly, 3 more stepped in, their movements fast, blades sharp. The human spun, blocking one strike, dodging another. His branch cracked again and again, splinters flying into the night. His body was slowing, but his will did not break. One blade finally found its mark, slicing across his arm. He hissed in pain, blood running down. The girl cried out, her voice sharp and breaking. She wanted to move, to help, but her legs would not obey. Fear chained her in place. The human stumbled but did not fall. He shifted his grip, holding the branch tighter. He glared at the hunters, his voice rough as he shouted at them. They could not understand his words, but they felt his fire. They saw that this human, weak and wounded, would never yield. The leader snarled, his patience breaking. He stepped forward himself, larger and stronger than the others. His weapon gleamed as he raised it high. The human stood his ground, his knees shook, his body screamed for rest. But he lifted the branch, facing the leader without fear. The moment stretched, silent but heavy. The girl's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded as if it would burst. She whispered his name, though she had never spoken it before. Her voice carried something new, not just fear, but hope. The leader swung down with all his force. The human met it with his branch. Wood cracked, splintered. The force drove him to his knees, but he held on. His arm shook, his muscles burned, but he did not let the weapon break through. The girl screamed, her voice echoing like a bell in the night. The sound froze the hunters for a heartbeat. Even the leader paused, his blade locked against the broken branch. Her cry was filled with power she did not yet understand. It was more than fear. It was awakening. The human pushed upward with the last of his strength, forcing the leader back a single step. His chest heaved, his vision blurred. He knew he could not last much longer, but he had made his stand. He had shown the girl and the hunters both that a human would not bow. The fire flickered. Shadows stretched. The hunters hissed in anger, closing in again. The girl's hands glowed faintly as she pressed them to the ground. Something inside her was stirring, something she could not control. The human stood ready, blood dripping from his arm, his branch broken in half. His voice was rough but steady. He would fight until his last breath. The girl rose slowly behind him, her eyes burning like stars. The hunters had come expecting to take back a prize, but what they faced now was no longer helpless prey. It was a bond forged in fire, in flood, and in defiance. The night was far from over, and the true battle was only beginning. The clearing was alive with firelight and fury. The human stood with blood dripping down his arm, his branch broken, his chest heaving with every breath. The hunters circled closer, their blades glinting as the fire cast sharp shadows across their faces. They thought the fight was already theirs. They thought the human was moments away from falling. Behind him, the alien girl rose slowly to her feet, her small frame trembling, her hands glowing faintly in the dark. She did not understand what was happening inside her, but something deep was stirring. Her heart pounded as if calling forth a hidden force. Her tears had stopped, her fear now mixing with something stronger. The leader snarled, stepping forward again, his heavy weapon raised high. The human planted his feet and lifted what remained of his branch. His body screamed with pain, but his spirit burned brighter. He was not fighting for himself, he was fighting for her, the fragile girl who had chosen to trust him. The leader swung, the human blocked, the branch snapping again. Under the strike, splinters flew, the sound sharp in the air. The impact forced him backward, his knees hitting the muddy ground. The hunters hissed in delight, thinking the battle was done. But then the girl screamed, not a cry of fear, but a cry that split the air like thunder. Her glowing eyes shone like twin stars. Her hands burst with light, silver and bright, washing. Across the clearing, the hunters stumbled back, shielding their faces, hissing in pain. The human looked up in shock. His eyes widened at the sight of her small body surrounded by radiant light. She stood tall, though trembling, her power flowing like a river. For the first time, she did not look weak. She did not look helpless. She looked like something untamed, something hidden until now. The hunters roared in anger, but their steps faltered. They swung their weapons, but the light burned against them, forcing them back. The leader cursed, his sharp teeth bared. He tried to press forward, but his legs trembled under the glow. The girl lifted her hands higher. The energy pulsed from her chest. She did not know how to control it, but her heart guided her. Her fear turned to courage, her pain turned to strength. She cried out again, her voice shaking the air. The ground trembled, the fire swayed. The hunters fell back farther, some clutching their eyes, some tripping over roots as they tried to resist. The leader snarled and pressed against the light, but even he stumbled. His body shivered as if struck by invisible chains. The human stared, his breath catching. He had thought she was fragile, but now he saw the truth. Inside her lived a force greater than anything he had ever seen. She was not just a girl lost in the flood, she was more, and the hunters had feared this. That was why they wanted her bound. That was why they chased her. The girl's body shook violently as the power surged. Her knees buckled, her voice broke. The light flashed one last time, brighter than fire, brighter than the moon. Then it faded, leaving only the glow in her trembling eyes. She collapsed, her small frame falling backward. The human rushed forward, catching her in his arms. Her body was weak, almost lifeless, but her eyes looked up at him, shining with trust. She whispered, something faint, a word he could not understand, but he knew its meaning. She trusted him, she belonged to him. The hunters hesitated. Some crawled back into the trees, their courage shattered. The leader snarled, his pride wounded, his gaze burned with hatred. As he pointed at them, shouting in rage, he would not give up, he would come again, but not tonight. One by one, the hunters vanished into the dark, their voices fading into the forest. The clearing grew quiet, only the fire crackling softly. The human knelt on the ground, holding the girl against his chest. His blood mixed with the mud, his breath heavy, but his heart steady. He brushed a strand of wet hair from her face, whispering soft words she could not understand. Yet she smiled faintly, her glowing eyes closing as sleep took her. She had given everything, and now she rested in his arms. The human looked toward the trees. His jaw tightened. He knew the hunters would return, but he also knew he would be ready. With her power and his resolve, they were no longer prey. The flood had thrown them together. The storm had stripped them bare, but tonight had changed everything. Tonight they had found a bond that no storm, no hunter could break. The forest was quiet at last. The hunters were gone, their footsteps fading into the night. Only the crackle of the small fire and the rushing of the distant river filled the air. The human sat on the cold ground, the alien girl resting in his arms. Her head lay against his chest, her glowing eyes closed, her body trembling from exhaustion. He looked down at her, his heart heavy. She had unleashed a power she herself did not understand, a force that had saved them but nearly drained the life from her. His jacket hung loosely around her thin frame, soaked and torn but still shielding her. He brushed a hand gently across her damp hair, whispering words of comfort she could not hear. The moon hung high above the trees, silver light shining across the broken clearing. The fire cast a warm glow on their faces. The human's body ached from wounds, his arm still bleeding, but he ignored the pain. All that mattered was the fragile girl who had trusted him, who had risked everything to protect them both. Slowly she stirred. Her eyes opened halfway, glowing faintly like fading stars. She whispered something in her tongue, her voice weak but steady. He could not understand the words, but he saw the meaning in her eyes. She was asking if he was still there, if he would still stay. He gave a small nod, his hand steady on her shoulder. His eyes held no doubt, no hesitation. He was not leaving her. Not now, not ever. She blinked, a faint smile crossing her lips, a smile born not of joy, but of relief. For the first time in her life, someone had chosen her, not abandoned her. The human carefully lifted her closer to the fire. He adjusted the flames, feeding them with more branches until the warmth spread wider. She sighed softly, leaning into him. Her small hands gripped his torn shirt as if afraid he might disappear. He wrapped his arm around her shoulders, keeping her safe against the night. Hours passed slowly. The stars wheeled across the sky. The forest, once full of threat, grew still. Under their watch, the girl finally slept deeply, her breathing soft and calm. The human stayed awake, guarding her, his eyes scanning the trees. He knew the hunters might return, but for now, she needed peace. When dawn finally broke, the world seemed new. The first light of morning touched the wet leaves, painting them gold. Mist rose from the river, the storm's fury now only a memory. The girl stirred, her eyes opening to the sight of the rising sun. She gasped softly, as if she had not seen beauty in many years. She turned her gaze toward the human. Her lips moved slowly, forming strange words. She repeated them, pointing at herself, then at him. He realized she was telling him her name, fragile and melodic. He repeated it clumsily, earning a soft laugh from her. It was the first laugh he had heard from her, light and pure. Then she pointed at him, tilting her head. She wanted to know his name. He spoke it firmly, slowly, so she could remember. She tried to repeat it, her accent twisting the sound, but the effort made him smile. In that moment, the distance between human and alien faded. They were no longer strangers. They were companions bound by survival. The girl sat up weakly, looking out toward the forest. Her voice lowered as she spoke in her language, but her eyes told the story. She was no longer running aimlessly. She had found somewhere to stay. She had found someone to stay with. The human stood, offering her his hand. She hesitated, then placed her small hand in his. Together they stepped out of the broken clearing, leaving the ashes of the fire behind. The flood had washed away everything, but it had also given them something no one could take. As they walked, the girl glanced up at him, her eyes glowing brighter in the morning sun. She whispered his name once more, her voice soft but steady. He looked down at her, and though he could not understand her words, he understood her heart. She was no longer just a frightened alien girl, and he was no longer just a lone human traveler. The storm had stripped them bare, the flood had swept away their walls, and together they had found something new. A bond forged not in safety, but in fire, flood, and defiance. A bond that could change everything, not only for them but for their worlds.